On the line with us is Thom DeChristopher. He is a climate activist and defendant in the #climate trial. His website, Thom DeChristopher, DeChristopher.org, and also climatedisobedience.org. You can tweet him at DeChristopher and at climatedisobey. Thom, welcome to the program.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. Yeah, it's you guys just had a judgment. Tell us what led up to it, and tell us what happened.
Yeah, so this trial was about the West Roxbury pipeline resistance, which was a sustained campaign of resistance against the frack gas pipeline going through the West Roxbury neighborhood of Boston. Over the course of 2015 and 2016, there was a lot of resistance actions, dozens and dozens of protests and civil disobedience actions. Over 200 people, or around 200 people, were arrested over the course of that campaign. And over the course of that, there were a group of us that decided that we wanted to not take the plea bargains that were offered to us and the settlements, and instead try to take our cases to trial. And so we worked our case through the court system over the past.
What were you charged with?
Almost 2 years now. We were charged with trespass, resisting arrest, and disturbing the peace.
Okay.
And over the course of those hearings, the resisting arrest charges were dropped because there was no evidence for that. And so we were moving to trial, hoping to put on what's called the necessity defense, the argument that we had a necessity to act to prevent greater harm. And I think we had about as strong of a case as we could have on that. And then the week before trial, just last week, the prosecutor announced that they were dropping the charges to civil infractions, which is more like the realm of a speeding ticket, which meant that we no longer had the opportunity to have a jury trial. We could no longer call the expert witnesses we were expecting to. And so we were incredibly constricted, and we didn't really know what to expect going into court yesterday. But we asked the judge to still give us a hearing on this case as it remained. So there were 13 of us as defendants, and each one of us spoke for a couple minutes and basically made a extremely compressed version of the necessity defense, which we had intended to put on over the course of a week with ample information, and we made it as concise as possible. And at the end of that, the judge ruled in our favor and acquitted us based on the necessity defense, and made it clear that she was making that ruling by reason of necessity.
Now that's remarkable. We're talking to Thom DeChristopher, climate activist and a defendant in the #climate trial in Roxbury, Boston area, Massachusetts. Thom, can you summarize your defense for us?
Sure. You know, the necessity defense requires that you're acting to prevent an imminent harm, that harm is less than whatever you do to try to stop it. It requires that you have a lack of reasonable alternatives or legal alternatives, and it requires a reasonable expectation that your actions can actually prevent the harm in question. And so our case basically boiled down to the fact that this fracked gas pipeline represented an imminent harm. Part of that imminent harm would be if the pipeline didn't work as intended and there was a catastrophic explosion or something like that, which was fairly likely because it ran 100 yards from an active quarry where they were still blasting with dynamite, and the ground shook there every day or so. But even more significant was the very imminent harm that would result if the pipeline did work as intended and continued to allow the expansion of fracking in places like Pennsylvania and West Virginia and Ohio, and exacerbate the extreme harms that are occurring there, and continue to allow natural gas to flow into power plants or homes where it's going to be burned and exacerbate the climate crisis. Those are guaranteed harms that are already underway.
And the judge acknowledged those?
Yes.
Wow.
The judge acknowledged that harm, and we also had a strong case that both in this particular pipeline and in the more general fight against climate change, folks really have pursued every reasonable option to affect change within the lawful structures that are available to us. And in this particular case with this pipeline, every elected official that represented that community of Boston, with the exception of their governor, opposed this pipeline. The Boston City Council unanimously opposed it. The mayor of Boston got the city to sue the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to try to stop it. And so we actually had a Boston City councilor that was ready to take the stand in our defense to testify that they had done everything they could within the system to try to stop it, and that there was nothing that they could do because the control of our government by the fossil fuel industry is so overwhelming that there's nothing a municipality can do within the legal system to try to prevent fossil fuel infrastructure.
So you have successfully prevented yourself from going to jail or paying fines or anything like that. Did you guys stop the pipeline, or has it been installed, or what's the status of that?
No, the pipeline went through. The pipeline is now flowing. The city still has an ongoing lawsuit against the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, trying to get them to shut it off. But that's obviously a very uphill battle.
Right.
And so our final piece of that defense about the reasonable expectation that we could win, really boiled down to an argument about the power of social movements and the power of civil disobedience and the power of a sustained local resistance campaign like this that we have seen have a lot of impacts. We've seen it stop pipelines in other places. While this fight was going on in the Boston area, at the same time, Kinder Morgan, another pipeline company on the western side of Massachusetts, canceled their plans for another pipeline while they were watching the sustained resistance over in Boston. And as we've seen a lot of natural gas companies and pipeline companies make very clear statements over the past few months to their shareholders and their industry groups that they can't put in any new infrastructure without a really high level of resistance from local communities, that every single project is being fought right now. And I think that's a testament to the strength of the climate movement right now.
Yeah, it really is, and it's extraordinary. I'm guessing probably since this trial was not, they ended up dropping the major charges against you, and so you were basically, adjudicating traffic tickets or the equivalent thereof. That this is not the sort of thing that anybody's going to take to a higher court or appeal to try and overturn, to try and put you back in a position of being a defendant.
No, I'd say there's almost no chance of that. The prosecution dropped the charges because they didn't want to adjudicate this, because they didn't have much of an interest here. They didn't see a path that was actually a winning situation for them.
Right.
And so we were basically just using whatever opportunity we had within the system to try to make as positive an outcome as we could. Obviously, we would have liked a more intensive trial, and for us, it was a big disappointment that they dropped the charges.
Yeah.
But we recognized that this group of defendants that we had on this case was a group of mostly white activists that had the degree of privilege within our legal system to hold our ground in a different way than a lot of the people who are impacted by our legal system. And so we felt like because of that privilege, we had sort of had an obligation to use whatever opportunity we could to push back.
And a fine job you did.